You ready?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, all right, all right. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Minding My Mind on the Closing the Gap Broadcast Network. We can never be grateful enough for thanking Master Farad Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan for allowing us to have the beauty that is within us be here today on this platform. Hold on one second while I get us back on the screen, dear sister. Hold on one second.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, here we go, y'all. I feel accomplished. Welcome, 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 everyone. Thank you all again for coming to this particular broadcast because it's extremely important. And we have with us Sister LaWanda Muhammad. She is our guest speaker today. And our topic is navigating Medicare. Medicare is always a conundrum to myself and others. And because I'm approaching that age of perhaps needing Medicare, I just thought that it might be very, very important because I know that seniors today are suffering. They're not experiencing this particular, I can finally rest after 45 years of giving my life to another entity. And they're finding out that things are not what they are supposed to be and not what they should be. I remember when I was 18 years old and Jimmy Carter was the president, dear sister, and he said that I was 18. And I remember him saying in the State of the Union address that those who were 18 years old at that particular time, by the time they're 65 years old, Social Security would not exist. So I thought, I was very vibrant in my thinking at that time. And I wrote a letter and asked them to stop taking taxes out of my check.
Yes,
No,
ma'am.
because my thought was, well, hey, if the Social Security is being taken out of my check every 2 weeks and it's supposed to come to me, if it's not going to be there, then stop taking the money out.
Yes, ma'am.
Just to say that I got in trouble with a whole bunch of government people and my mom at the same time. I came home from work one day. What did you do? It's like, Mom, what are you talking about? She told me that the FBI had came to the house. It
The
was
FBI?
they did because they didn't understand. I don't know what they thought. But I said, I just asked them to stop taking money out of my check. And that's what she said. You are going to learn that
Oh, wow.
what cannot come out all the time, and so I thought that would be a funny little story to share with everybody. And it's not that I was trying to create trouble. I just wanted to understand how things worked.
Yes,
So I'm
ma'am.
going to put our medical disclaimer up on the screen. And I pray a lot that our listening audience is listening well because everyone deserves to have some forthright information as it relates to how to navigate Medicare. There are a lot of people out here that work that don't have Social Security money taken out of their check every day. There are people that are out here that really, really, really need the healthcare coverage. And I know that before the pandemic, I think it was right at the beginning of the pandemic when it hit in 2020, that Medicare came up with their final ruling and they explained more fully what they were going to include as far as the healthcare is concerned and what they were not going to include. So we're going to talk about that today. Sister LaWanda Muhammad, why don't you get started by sharing a little bit about yourself to our listening audience?
Yes, ma'am. Now I see that I'm frozen on the screen, so I don't know what it
We
looked
can
like on
hear
your
you.
side. Okay,
We
perfect.
still see your beautiful face
Yes,
and
ma'am.
we can hear you. So go right ahead, man.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I could tell you that I am a wife, a mother, and I've been working in the field in the service industry for years. Maybe not this field, but definitely just service industry. And I know that that is something that is really kind of close to my heart because I feel like that's exactly what I'm supposed to do is service people. Um, I came from the hair industry So is a little bit about me, sis.
Oh, yes, ma'am. All praise is due to Allah.
Wow. I'm looking at the screen.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Don't sis, don't worry about it.
Okay.
And I want to thank again our listening audience to thank you for tuning in to Minding Our Mind to a Healthier Me. So, sis, how long have you worked in this field?
Well, I've been in the Medicare field for 4 years, but I have to honestly say I did not work it the first year because it was just a whole lot, too much. It was a lot of training, and I did not want to mess anyone up. So I just kind of took my time and just coming into the Medicare field. So, yes, ma'am. Before that, I was in, of course, I was doing in the hair business, but also doing life insurance. So I was doing that part time.
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
It really takes that much training to understand how Medicare works.
Yes, ma'am. That's how come I believe it's just confusing. Sometimes I say confusing on purpose because if we're in a class and we have to continue to take class after class, and this is yearly, sis, we have to take an AHIP class. And once we take that, and that is AHIP is American, oh gosh, what is that? It's in the health field, but it is an AHIP class that we have to take yearly, and we have to pay for continued education. And then once we do that, we are for every carrier that we have to get certified with them. So it's a
Oh,
lot of training. Yes, ma'am, for each and every carrier.
oh, yes, ma'am. As I stated before, in 2020, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services published its final ruling and revised many of their policies regarding healthcare benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I was in college and my major was healthcare administration. So I delved into the abyss of this final ruling.
Oh, did
And
you?
I did. And it took over a month for me to actually read it because I was studying it. And when I study things, sometimes I go down this rabbit hole because it's like, okay, what is this? What is that? What does this mean? How is it going to affect people? And one thing that I came up with that I saw, there were over 400 different itty bitty categorical changes
Mm-hmm.
that were
Mm-hmm.
made. For example, one thing that I learned is that, say, for example, if a person has a chronic illness and they have been it's been uncontrolled for a number of years, or they've been hospitalized for the same thing repeatedly, then some of the services that they were giving were going to work that they were receiving was going to be diminished if they went under the auspices of home health care. And when a person is discharged from the hospital, they are automatically sent, if they don't have anybody at home to help them, they're automatically relayed to a SNF. And for those of you who don't know what that means, that just means skilled nursing facility. And if
Yes.
you don't understand what that is, it's a convalescent home. They
Mm-hmm.
just rearranged it, they just changed the name so that for whatever reason, I can't say why they call convalescent homes skilled nursing facilities now. So
Mm.
what changes came into play at that time according to your the type of work that you do that impacted the seniors the most, both positively and negatively?
You know what? Honestly, sis, because they change so much, and I really wasn't into Medicare at that time, I can't really answer the changes for Medicare for 2020. I know that they're changing constantly. It's always a final rule that's going on. So last year, the final rule, and I did pull some things up in reference to the final rule for 2023. And
Okay.
it was like the rule, that prohibits the sharing of personal beneficiaries' data collected by a third party. So that was a major rule that
What does that
changed.
mean? What does
Well,
that mean?
basically, these marketers, basically third party marketers, are sharing, they're collecting information, whether it's on Facebook or however they do it. And they're
Mhm.
collecting this information, and then they're selling these leads to companies or people like myself in the healthcare industry that are purchasing leads. And some of them may sell the lead to more than one person. So they had to crack down on that and make
Mhm.
sure that the beneficiary, which is the enrollee, gives their consent to share their information. So I know that for 2025, they're really implementing that rule. So it was out there on 2024, and a whole lot of rules came, and the way we operate and do business changed. But I know that last year there was so many calls to the seniors
Mhm.
where it was overwhelming and too much. And they got the complaints and they heard the consumers, and so, or the clients, and they just said we have to fix it. And I think this is where they're getting to when it comes to third marketers that are selling this information to different people like
Will
myself.
there be any if the enrollee or the client has not agreed to for that person or that entity to even have that information, let alone sell it?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any compensatory damages done to that person? Because I get that my husband gets those calls
Mm-hmm.
daily,
Mm-hmm.
practically all day,
Mm-hmm.
from about 7 in the morning until I know that I go to work and he drops me off at 10 o'clock. So that's 3 straight hours. And I know that they still call him. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that that's very irritating. He's
Mm-hmm.
nice, but I would tell him, please, the SEC forbids you to harass me on the
Exactly.
phone. And what's your name again? I want to make
Mm-hmm.
sure I spell it right when I report you. Then I
Right.
don't get the calls anymore.
Right.
But you know, that can be, do you consider that a positive or a negative?
I think it's a positive. I think it's a win-win on all, like from every angle. I think it's a win-win. First of all, if the beneficiary is giving their consent, then they're looking for someone to reach out to them, not just for someone to be calling their phone all day and marketing in such a way that's misleading. So they're really cracking down on that. And I really think it's a positive for them. Now, on the other side, for us agents who are buying these leads, now we know that it will be only one. These leads are not being sold to several different people at the same time. It's only being sold to one person. So I think it's just a win-win all the way around if you're purchasing leads and if the client consent too. So
So the client can consent to
mm-hmm,
having that information shared,
mm-hmm.
but they're not consenting to have it sold.
Right.
Is
They're
there
not
a difference or is it like
exactly.
a thin line?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. They're not consenting to it to be, having it sold. So
Wow.
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I was getting ready to say something, but just like I shared with you when we were off the air, everything that can't come up, come out, cannot come out. So I'm gonna keep that, I'm gonna keep that thought to myself, Sister LaWanda.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
And
ma'am.
another thing, and I noticed that during the pandemic and maybe right before,
Mm-hmm.
we started seeing, and you know how years and years ago, or maybe you don't know, but years and years ago, what they call open season or open enrollment was from October to December
Yes,
for
ma'am.
people to change their healthcare plan if they wanted to.
Yes.
Whether and it was happening with people who received, like out here, it's called Medi-Cal, those that receive Medicaid or public assistance healthcare, or
Mm-hmm.
those that were in the private sector getting their healthcare plans or their medical plans from their doctors or through their jobs. It was from October to December. But
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, right at the end of, and from October of 2019 all the way through, I think maybe 2021 and part of 2022, all you saw on television were commercials.
Yes,
They had,
ma'am.
let me see, George Foreman, they had Joe Namath, they had Jimmy Walker and
Yes.
others that were advertising signing up for Medicare under these different entities.
Yes, ma'am.
So it got to be kind of confusing for some people because they're under the impression if I sign up for Medicare, excuse me,
Mhm.
then I automatically get parts A, B, C, and D. Can you please excuse me, everybody?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Can you explain those parts to us more concisely?
Yes, ma'am. So you have your annual enrollment period, which is your they call AEP. And that is from October the 15th through December 7th. So that is the main enrollment period when everybody enrolls. Now, when January comes, there's the open enrollment period. So January 1st through March
To those of
31st.
us that are in the listening audience, our sister is experiencing some technical difficulties. Can you go back? You said October 15th to October 15th through December what? Is the
So
and the AEP?
the beginning of AEP starts October 15th and it ends December 7th.
Okay.
And that is our annual enrollment period. So that's when mostly everyone with a Medicare Advantage plan can actually sign in and go into a plan, basically. Can you hear me, sis?
Yes, I can. Loud and clear. What's Medicare Advantage versus Medicare? What's the difference between the two?
Okay, so original Medicare is parts A and B.
Which
And
are covers
which
what?
are so A covers your hospital. So to make it simple, and this is how I like to explain it to all of my clients, is part A is you think of it as your hospital, your outpatient stay, not your inpatient stay. So it's your inpatient stay, it's your skilled nursing facility, hospice care, some in-home health care, but definitely hospital. So that's your part A. And
Okay.
most of us have paid into Part A if you worked 40 quarters or 10 years. You have paid into Part A. Part B is your outpatient. So that is going to the doctor, seeing a specialist, preventative care, DME equipment like a wheelchair, a walker, or things of that nature. That's Part B. And when we think of Part D, you think of your drug coverage. So that's Part D. Now, a Medicare Advantage plan is Part C. And basically, it's Part A and B, and sometimes Part D all bundled into one package. And that's how you get the Medicare Part C. And you have to have, in order to have Part C, you have to have Part A and B. So that's how some of the letters of the alphabets, but I try to keep it as simple as possible because you can really lose people when you start getting into the alphabets.
So what does Part C cover again?
Part C is Part A. So Part C is 20%. So original Medicare covers 80%. Part C covers 20%. And so it covers everything. So if you had just original Medicare alone, so some people that I notice are walking around with just the Medicare Part A and B card, the red, white, and blue card, and they
Correct.
think they've made it, right? But if anything major happens to them, they're out of pocket. They have to pay that 20% cost. So again, Medicare is only going to pay that 80%. Now, what most people do is have either a Medigap plan, and that's your supplement plan. That's just another word for supplement, but that's a high premium plan. So you're paying around $400 to $500 out of pocket a month with that because you have to get a standalone Part D plan. So here I am with a Medicare, my original Medicare, and then I'm looking for original Medicare. Now, original Medicare works for a lot of people. And some of the benefits for just having original Medicare with a supplement plan, but original Medicare allows you to go anywhere in the United States that accepts Medicare. And so that's 98% of providers that accept original Medicare. versus going into a Medicare Advantage plan, Part C, where you have to stay in network. There's some PPOs, but majority of the Medicare Advantage plans, Part C, is a PPO plan. I mean, it's an HMO plan. And so you have to stay in network wherever that doctor is, your primary care physician, you want to stay in network with that doctor. And that doctor is the one who does the referrals.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So let me get this straight. I get what you're saying about the Medicare, the straight Medicare, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to say regular Medicare. They
Okay.
pay for 80%. And when a person enrolls in that, they get Part A, which is inpatient. Part B will be outpatient.
Yes,
Part
ma'am.
D is for prescription medications, either free or with a small copay, right? And
Yeah,
C
if you do a
is,
standalone. Mm-hmm.
ma'am,
If you do a standalone, it's a premium and there is copay.
wow. And
Mm-hmm.
C is the bundle.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
But if you get C, that's called quote unquote Medicare Advantage.
Yes, it's a Medicare
And with
Advantage
that
plan.
bundle, I get A, B, C, and D coverage.
Yes, ma'am.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are the disadvantages of enrolling in Medicare Advantage?
The disenrollment that a lot of people look at is the HMO, it's the referrals. Sometimes having to wait to see a specialist because you're being referred out. Um, let's see, that's one. Let me see. I think there is something else to it. It's just really being in network. Honestly, I think that is one of the most disadvantages if you don't care for HMO. They do have some PPO plans, but majority is HMO plans. So it's just
I
being
can
in network.
I can basically see how and why that would be done that way because having worked in the healthcare field in Spa 6
Mm-hmm.
here in LA. And for those of you who don't know, a spa is nothing more than a service provider area. And Spa 6 is the most disenfranchised communities. Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
The monies that go, it's a lot. It's millions and millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, that government entities have to pay for healthcare for millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
At the time that I was working, there were over 10,500,000 people that were receiving Medicare, Medicaid, CAL benefits. 65% of that budget went to 5% of the people.
Mm.
Please forgive me.
Yes, ma'am. You have any water?
I didn't want to get up and go get it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Please forgive me, and I am so embarrassed, but it is what it is, and I'm going to thug it out. And I say that because when you have 5% of the population using 65% of the money because repeated readmissions,
Mm-hmm.
because they're not taking care of their health, CMS had to think of something to do so that they would not be able to have to incur that cost for
Yes.
taking care of people that did not take care of themselves.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
So
ma'am.
I kind of get that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a lot of things that they do that is really, really good, because it's really all about the enrollees and the beneficiaries and getting into plans. And um, just protecting them, but at the same time, they are, looking at a way to make it make sense for themselves, where there's not all this money being wasted or, just going out. They have to balance it in order to, again, make it make sense.
Well, and that's true. That's that phrase, make it make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the sadness in when I first got into nursing of seeing our elders in convalescent homes or SNFs,
Mm-hmm.
and they have worked all their lives and they're in their golden years, and they wind up in convalescent homes because of something that kind of went hinky when they were younger.
Mm.
And then a lot of them did not have visitors. Their lives were locked in a room that maybe they had to share. There were people in there who had been living there. That's their home. And they had been living there for years. And I worked in one for over 2 years, and there were some patients or clients that were in there that never saw a family member.
Wow.
And their Medicare was paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, they didn't have Medicare Advantage. So
Yeah.
that's where the Medi part comes in, where you have Medicare and Medi-Cal.
Yes, ma'am.
And what Medicare doesn't cover, it may cover from 1 to 30 days or whatever, however the
Yes,
protocol
ma'am.
calls for it. And when Medicare runs out, that's when Medi-Cal kicks in.
Okay.
And I think that is sad. And it made me think about a lot about taking better care of myself because Anissa don't want to go out like that, man.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And I don't think any one of us want to go out like that.
But
It's something because I do, and I actually feel um your passion. I feel that when it comes down to our seniors living in these skilled nursing facilities, because I feel it when I go to a senior's home and I sit with them and I talk to them. And it's just so interesting. And I think this is why I love what I do so much is sitting with them. You get to really talk to them and see, how they living. And it's just, you can't think when you walk away from them, you think about, wow, is this going to happen to me when I get older? We're on a fixed income. So they came from the work industry to a fixed budget. And on the fixed budget, you know, all these bills are piling up. They just can't live the way they used to live, and they have to be on this fixed budget. And to see the struggles that some of them go through, it's heartbreaking. So to be able to find a plan that would help them just a little bit, get help them just a little bit with maybe utilities or money or just transportation to and from the doctor. It's rewarding to find, or actually to find a plan and put them in that will help them and allow them, and then take some of that load off of them and that stress, because it's just so many of them that are that are struggling that
it
are
is,
struggling.
it
Yes,
is.
ma'am. Yes,
So
ma'am.
when you're talking about finding a plan, do you mean the Medicare or the Medicare Advantage?
Well, whatever fits their needs. So it's whatever is best for them. Some people prefer a Medicare Advantage plan. They want to go to their own doctors. They want to choose, go wherever they want to go. And even if they're travelers, they want to be able to go, and they're okay with paying that high premium. But a lot of my clients are on a Medicare Advantage plan because they cannot afford the high premium. So a lot of the Medicare Advantage plans have low to zero premiums a month. And so that's what a lot of people go towards. And then there's just extra benefits like your dental, your vision, your hearing, gym. over the counter supplements. You could go and get all of this stuff with a Medicare Advantage plan.
I think another perk to that Medicare Advantage plan is much like I call it one-stop shopping.
Mm,
When you like, say for example, the one of the places where I worked, they were good at that. They
mm,
had a hospital next door. This was the outpatient clinic part. They had the labs, they had radiology, they had every specialty that you possibly could need,
mm-hmm.
even the dental office in that building.
Oh, yes.
So when you have a PPO, you might have your dentist might be in San Pedro. You may have a cardiologist that may be somewhere in Beverly Hills. So
Mm-hmm.
and they may not have the transportation, or maybe they can't afford the gas to go all of these different places.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, and I learned this the hard way myself. Sometimes you go right out of the frying pan into the fire
Right.
because you think that you're getting better services because you PPO. But I know that Medicare is not, and Medi-Cal either, or Medicaid is not paying these doctors as much as they could get from someone that was paying straight out of their pocket.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
And
ma'am.
unfortunately, I hate to say this, but it's true. In healthcare, you still get what you pay for.
Mm-hmm. You do. You
You
do.
still get what you pay for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it really is sad. And I really pray along that we're able to do something to help our seniors, especially those that work from K-C to K-C, and they work. My heart really goes out to those that work for entities that don't pay into Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't pay into Social Security, then you can't get that other benefit. You won't have the pension and the Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not getting Social Security, then you really can't get Medicare, right?
Yes, ma'am. And it's interesting that you just brought that up because I was just in a meeting last week, and a senior, she came up to me and she was talking, and she was talking about healthcare, and she wanted to know more and stuff. And then she just made mention, well, I don't have Part A because they didn't take it out at my job, and I just didn't want them taking out my money. She says, but now I'm in a situation where I'm paying out a lot of money a month just to have a health plan. Whereas if she would have paid into it, she would have been able to not have to worry about her medical costs as much as she's worried about it today. So it would have just helped. Um, Now, some people you can get Medicare Part A if you didn't work 40 quarters or 10 straight years. If you work 30 quarters, they just kind of prorate the cost. But the high rate for Part A is, if you haven't worked into it, it is $505 a month. And if you can pay $505 a month, you know, then I guess you're okay. Now, if you have a spouse that has turned 65 and paid into Medicare, then you can actually use his benefits to have Part A and B. But if you don't have Part A, like the lady that I had spoke to last week, she's paying a lot out of pocket just to see the doctor's office. I mean, just going to the doctors or just to be seen, just for healthcare alone. Yes,
That's really
ma'am.
something when, in one sense, having been in the healthcare field for a long time, it's a gain. It's a game that's being played, and it's a game that very few people are able to win, because when you're looking at a person who has evolved and grown up in this society here in the Western Hemisphere in North America, thinking that if I work 10, 20, 30 years at this one particular job,
Mm-hmm.
just graduate from high school, just get grandfathered into working at a plant, just do blah, 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 and you're set for life.
Hmm.
But you're not. There are some seniors out here that have to eat canned pork and beans.
Yes, ma'am.
There are seniors out here that have to eat other things by other means. And if they don't have family that's really near them to help them in a good way,
Mm-hmm.
because I have, in my line of work, I have actually seen people that are in their 70s supplementing whatever income that they have to be an in-home support service worker for somebody that's in their 80s or 90s,
Yes.
and they can barely take care of themselves. They
Mm-hmm.
can barely make it up the stairs. But people have to do what they got to do, and they suffer.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's what's heartbreaking for me.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And me too, because I see it. I see the same thing. Mm-hmm. I had a
And
senior ask me, "Can I be your assistant? Is there something that you can give me, something that I can do?" You know, and that's hard. It's just
it
hard.
is.
It's hard
And
to
then to add insult to injury, Sister LaWanda, you have seniors that, say, for example, 30 years ago, they were the best legal secretary on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago, they were programming computers. But because now that I'm retired and I have to go back to work, they have the audacity to insult them by saying, we'll pay you $17 an hour,
Mm-hmm. $20 an hour. Yes, ma'am.
$20 an hour.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
an insult.
Yes, ma'am.
But they have, I mean, because what? 10 years ago, I was making 4 or 5 times as much money. But
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a senior now, you think that I can work for less?
And it's nothing here in California. It's nothing.
No, it's not. It's really a struggle, and it's really sad.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
And
ma'am.
another thing that inspired me to want to do this and have you on as a guest is because I'm at that age
Yes, ma'am.
now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I'm getting inundated with mail about Medicare,
Yes,
sign
ma'am.
up, sign up, sign this, sign that. And I'm thinking to myself, I will after I talk to Sister LaWanda and I toss it to the side.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for considering me, Sister Nisa.
Girl, for real. Because I know you're gonna give me the real deal.
Yes,
But I
ma'am.
know that there are people out there, again, back to the issue of people who work for entities that did not get Social Security, but they want to hang in there and work. I've been here 40 years. If I can just hang in there 5 more years, I can get the retirement of $400,000, $500,000. That's your retirement plan.
Mm,
But that's really no money,
mm-mm, mm-mm. No, ma'am.
because if you're paying all your money out and not getting any in, like if you don't have no hustle,
Mm-hmm. It'll go.
then that money is going to go quickly.
Yes.
And if you can't get Medicare, you still got to buy food. You still got to pay rent or mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
Then you may get conned or talked into refinancing your home. You know, rent out here in Los Angeles is, even for seniors,
Look, I just want to turn my head on that. It just don't even make sense. It don't make sense.
So I really, and then to have your hard-earned money doled out to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when you retire with that half a mil, they're only going to give you what, maybe $3,000 a month.
Yes, ma'am.
You can't live off that, not in LA,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because your rent is going to be anywhere between 15 to 2,000, $2,500 a month for real.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm. And that might be for one bedroom. So it just depends. Yes, ma'am.
And then I know that when I used to help my clients try to find places where they can move into that were for seniors, supposedly at a discount, they were asking for 3 times the month, 3 times the amount of the rent. If they had that kind of income, they wouldn't need to live in those senior citizen
Yes,
buildings.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
That's why a great deal of the population of the homeless in LA are seniors.
Mm-hmm.
And many of them, for whatever reason, don't want to go live with family members.
No.
Some
No.
of it is pride, some of it is disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Yes.
know that just the thought process of trying to encapsulate everything that you just shared,
Mm-hmm.
and we're sharing with our listening audience, for those of you who have 20, 30 years left before you get to retirement age, you better listen. You better take heed, because we don't know where Social Security is going to be in the next 5 years.
We don't. We don't.
They've been talking about privatizing Social Security for years. Y'all talk about old people, but the baby boomers got together and said, no, y'all not finna let that happen, because we already not getting anything.
Right. Right.
And if it's privatized, it's only going to get worse.
Mm-hmm.
Because just sit back and think about it. And this goes back into that thing I was talking about that game. The monies that are taken out of millions of people's checks going into a big Social Security fund
Mm-hmm.
for our future, for my future. That money's sitting in somebody's bank gaining interest.
Yes. You have a
So
point.
who's keeping the interest money? And what are y'all doing with it? You didn't ask me, could you invest that money in something, because you making money off my money. You did not ask so-and-so's permission. Hey, so you got this amount of money in here. Can we use this money? You're going to say that it's the government's money. No, it isn't. That's the taxpayers' money that you're gambling with, that you're playing with, because the poor never see it.
Yes, ma'am. And we see it time and time again. We see our money going to different
Everywhere.
countries all over the place, and we didn't consent to it. So it's yes, ma'am.
Exactly. And,
Mm-hmm.
and, and that just goes back to, I want to say empathy and not sympathy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why, and now it's like, oh my God, the baby boomers, they're living longer.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Yes, ma'am.
Because if I'm not, oh, let me ask you this. Can seniors, I don't even know if you know the answer to this question, but can seniors leave their Social Security money to an offspring?
I don't think so, but I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
I'm going to find out.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
know you can leave your pension to your offspring.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, you can
Social
definitely.
Security is something short of like a a supplementary pension for me. That's what it's supposed to be.
Yes, ma'am.
If I
Well,
work for that money,
mm-hmm,
then how come I can't leave it to somebody? And that's why it's like, oh my God, the
mm-hmm,
seniors are living longer. What are we going to do?
mm-hmm.
We anticipated the trajectory of seniors dying at X age.
Yes, ma'am.
Now they're living until they're 70 and 80, and some of them are 90.
And some of them are 90. It's a lot that's in their 80s. There's some and that's in their 90s. Absolutely. Yes,
And
ma'am.
so, and I know that was a big uproar about maybe 25 years ago, that the baby boomers are living longer than they
Mm,
had anticipated.
yes,
That's
ma'am.
because we're figuring it out.
Yes,
We
ma'am.
don't we don't want to go out like that. We want to be able to live
Yes, ma'am.
and see our golden years, to see our grandchildren and our great grandchildren. We want to be able to relax
Mm-hmm.
and see some things, see the things in this world that we postponed because I was busy building somebody else's empire.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
You do
ma'am.
life insurance too, huh, sister?
Yes, ma'am, I do. I do. I started off in the life insurance, just doing final expense burial insurance. And that was what I did a lot. It was kind of surprising to me, how people wait and they don't, think it's important to get, but when something happened, we're doing fundraisers. So that right there is interesting. But another thing that's very interesting that happened to me, I signed a lot of people up with the final expense life insurance policies. And quite a few of them, believe it or not, when it came down to the holidays, they let it go. They let it lapse so they can give gifts for the family. And then they did not pick it back up. And that was an eye opener for me. I could not
Really?
believe, yes, ma'am, I could
Really?
not believe how people do not take life insurance serious. As a matter of fact, one day I was on a call with a gentleman and we're talking. He was interested in insurance. He called and got some information. And so I'm asking him questions, giving him, answering his questions. And um, at the end he was like, oh, okay, well, that's okay. Now he was married. And he says, he got mad at me, but it was okay. He said, well, it's okay, I'm gonna let my wife take care of it and stuff. And I said, oh, okay, so you're gonna leave funds to your wife? And he says, no, I'm gonna let her take care of it. And I said, so are you telling me that once you die, you're gonna leave that responsibility, that burden on your wife? And he said, and hung up the phone. It was unbelievable to me just how people think about final expense, which is burial insurance for some of you who don't know. But it is, people don't take it serious. And what I know, and the reason why I started off in final expense life insurance policy, because we was that family on the corner trying to raise money for my uncle when he passed, selling fish dinners, chicken dinners, car wash, and it was too much. And so we didn't really have time to grieve. And here we are after we raised the money. Now I'm in a depression. I am just depressed at everything. I got re-stimulated from my grandmother passing. It was just a whole lot happening at one time, but it just really is unfair. It's something that we should not leave. We should not leave that burden onto our families to have to take care of when it doesn't cost much for a life insurance policy or, again, final expense policy. It doesn't cost a lot. It doesn't, and I think that people really just need to get something. If it's five, 10, $15,000, get something. It's not going to cost much. The older you are, the more it's going to cost. The more health insurance, I mean, not the more health insurance, but the more health issues you have, it may it may cost more. Then you start to get into a graded policy. If you have a lot of health insurance policy, I mean health insurance, I'm sorry, I keep saying that. But if you have a lot of health issues, um, depending on what it is, some people are only able to get the graded. And the graded with some companies basically means that for 2 years, you pay a premium. So say if your monthly premium is $55 a month for this policy, well, you're going to pay $55 a month for 2 years. And if something happened to you before that 2-year period, then the company is going to give you all of that back to your family member. So everything you paid into it, they're going to give it back to your family member. And they're going to some companies give 10% on top of that. And then after the 2 years, then the family member gets the whole policy, whether it's $15,000, they get the whole amount. So, I think that is something that people need to know, because the first thing they'll say is, well, I can't afford it. Well, final expense and burial insurance, which is, again, it's the same thing. It doesn't cost much. It doesn't.
It doesn't. And for those of you in the listening audience, I got a final expense. Is that what it's called?
Yes, ma'am. I think it was a final expense. Mm-hmm.
I got a final expense policy through Sister LaWanda, and it was seamless. It did not take long, and I made up my mind. I told her what I wanted. We got on a call. She did it, and I had the option of actually choosing the day when I wanted the the payment for this policy to be on auto pay.
Mm-hmm.
I made that choice.
Yes, ma'am.
And I elected to do that, to have that that final expense policy separate from my life insurance policy, because what I'm leaving for my children and grandchildren, I did not want them to have to take out of that and pay to bury me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't think that was fair to them. So I do have the two separate policies.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have anything, please get a final expense burial, because it's your responsibility.
Yes, ma'am.
To take care of yourself while you're living.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's your responsibility to take care of yourself and have something in place so that your loved ones won't have to raise the money. Stay on top of the caveats and things, and check in with your insurance broker, your insurance agent, to find out if there is some things that have changed. Let's go over this policy again. Mm-hmm. And if you can increase the amount, they're not going to turn you down if you want to increase the amount. I don't know. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. And so those of you who have what they call those term life insurance policies, and you're paying into them, and say if your term is at 80, 85 years old, and you make it to 85 and a half or 86,
mm-hmm.
if that term was at 85 and something happens to you, God forbid,
mm-hmm.
your family does not get anything because it was turned out.
Mm-hmm. Nothing.
And that's why I said mine for 120 years.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if I'm gonna still be here. I don't know if I would live to be 100.
But you just might. You never know.
But I just might.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Even if I know that 120 is a long time to have to be able to live by God's grace.
Mm-hmm.
But in the next 5 years, I'm going to look into that and see if I can up the years some more,
mm-hmm.
as well as the amount.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because it's not fair that grandma or grandpa have been paying so long into this policy, and they family members really think that mom is covered, that grandpa's covered, and they misunderstood that policy.
Oh my goodness. Yes, ma'am.
And then they, and the family is so saddened because they really thought that they had a policy in place.
Mm-hmm.
So those of you with policies, I encourage you to sit down and talk about those policies to your children or whoever it is that you're trying to leave. They call them death benefits now. Whoever you're trying to leave your policy to, have that conversation with them. Have somebody younger than you look over that policy. Ask questions. Delve deeply into it, because of some of the rules and change maybe since you opened up that policy 40 years ago.
Yes. Yep. Policy reviews are always good. Always
Ma'am.
good. Yes, ma'am. It's interesting because I also help people who are trying to get in-home service support or some
Okay.
type of skilled nursing
Mm-hmm.
help, or their children are trying to get their parents into a skilled nursing facility, and they're paying this high cost, which is a share cost, and they're trying to eliminate that share cost by buying ancillary products. Ancillary products are like dental, vision, and hearing. But
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to spend that cost down so that their families can get into skilled nursing facilities. Now, it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting because when it comes down to life insurance,
Mm-hmm.
and if it has cash value, the in-home service support, so Medicare, Medi-Cal in some states, or Medi-Cal in California, Medicaid in different states. These people are trying to get their family into a skilled nursing facility and they have to pay it down. But when it comes down to getting life insurance, they could only have like $1,500 of coverage. They can't have anything of cash value. It's very interesting. Or they will have to go to,
Wow.
yes, ma'am, they will have to go to get a pre-need burial, which can only be 15,000 or less. So these things, it's just so much to it. Like you say, a game. It's so many moving parts, so many rules, and sometimes you just don't know. None of us know where we're going to end up as we get older. We don't know what kind of help we're going to need, but I'm getting more and more of these calls where the children are calling, trying to get help or skilled nursing, um, trying to get some help with the share costs. And so that's
Mhm.
another aspect to it, but it's very, very interesting. These are people who are trying to get Medicare or Medicaid to pay for the whole cost instead of having to pay out of pocket thousands of dollars.
I have one question. Hopefully, it'll be the last. With the PPO through Medicare,
Mm-hmm.
does that allow you? Because I know that the Affordable Care Act allows for a person to get alternative and complementary medicines, treatments, or therapies.
Mm-hmm.
When you're dealing with an HMO, they acknowledge that because a lot of the healthcare facilities get federal funding.
Mm-hmm.
Does Medicare allow that with the HMO, with the Medicare Advantage, and or also with the PPO? Like, say for example, if I keep having back pain, if I have sciatica, and I decide that I want to go to an acupuncturist in Chinatown, can I pay for that with my little red, white, and blue card, or do I have to go to the HMO or somebody that's in the network, so to speak?
Original Medicare will not pay for it, but a Medicare Advantage plan will pay for it, and some carriers will pay for it. So not all carriers, but a lot of carriers, a lot of HMO plans is covered. PPOs, it's a hit and miss, but definitely chiropractor, acupuncture, or even seeing like a holistic doctor, a DO, you can see in some cases
Okay.
if you choose these doctors. So yes, ma'am. And if I can just just say this, just as we come to a close. If I urge everyone, this for 2025, there's so many changes to the CMS final ruling when it comes down to the prescription drug costs and some of these plans. There's good things that's happening, and there's some things that you need to pay attention to. The prescription drug costs, well, the Medigap, or the what they call the donut hole, is going away. So that's a good thing for a lot of people, and they don't have to pay that. And it's going to be $2,000 is the cap, So once you hit that $2,000 mark and you spend that amount, then you pay no more. So that's a good thing. But I urge everyone to get a policy review, because some of the health cares where there are some things that's on tiers 1 and 2, that's zero cost, are going up to tiers 3 and 4 because the carriers don't want to be responsible for paying all of this. So I just really urge everyone to get a policy review, see if their plan is going to work good for them next year, and just compare, apples to apples, and then figure out what's best for you. So policy review as of October 1st, we can discuss it.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Real quick, explain what the tiers are.
Well, the tiers are where the medication. So usually the tiers 1 and 2 are your generic medication, and going up to tiers 3 and 4 are brand names. And the higher, well, if it's a brand name, it's gonna, it gets high. So the cost of the prescription is higher. So the tiers, so tier 1 and 2 usually are for generic medication.
Okay.
And it usually has no cost. And then the tiers 3 usually have like a copay, and it could be a copay and deductible. And then you start to get into tiers 4 and 5 where you have to pay percentages. Now, all of the carriers are different. All of them have their own unique design in the health plan, because one carrier, when you get to tier 6, there's zero cost, or it may be a very low cost. So it just really depends on which plan you choose.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sister LaWanda. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on this platform with me this evening. Again, this topic is so very important. And I'm just now looking at the comments that somebody sent in. Ezel Kursky had said, "Peace, family." Sister April Muhammad is watching. She said, "Sends the greetings of Assalamu alaikum." And closing the gap is just sending stars for us and for this platform. And I'm very grateful to Almighty God Allah that you agreed to be here, because this issue of healthcare for seniors and the Medicare and the Medicaid and the CMS and all of the rules are changing. A lot of times we are caught behind the 8 ball because we don't expect the change. They don't notify us when there's going to be a change. We won't find out that mostly until we try to pick up some prescription medications. And just so that the listeners will know, wherever you go, especially if you're in an HMO, sometimes you may go into the doctor and you go down to the pharmacy that's in the facility and they'll tell you your insurance doesn't cover this. Well, how come the doctor didn't tell me? Because he didn't look at the formulary before he hit the floor. The formulary changes from the pharmacy to the doctors are sent every single day, several times a day. And they'll tell you this particular type of medication is no longer covered under this plan, this plan, this plan, this plan. And they get so many of them a day.
Yes, ma'am. And if I could add that.
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry to that. I know that some of the doctors do, because I work in the doctor's offices too. Some of the doctors do try to help their patients and trying to navigate and move them to a different plan. And they are just comfortable with where they are, and they don't want to move no matter how much the cost is. I had a client that I helped maybe a couple of months ago. And it was this is real quick, but it was very interesting because in this health plan that he was in, he was paying $587 a month for his medication. And so his wife was like, of course she's taking care of everything. And she was like, no, 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 I don't want to go with that plan. They send me stuff. I don't know who they are. And I said, please hear me out. So I was able to reach her. And once I was able to reach her, she had, we sat down, we discussed the plan. He walked away with paying $11.97 a month versus $587 a month. So some of the doctors try, but some of these people, we're comfortable. We know what we know. We've been with this health plan for years. We don't want to go anywhere else, and that's it.
And I encourage anyone who has Medicare to please make sure that somehow or another you get Part D, because that's the one that covers for medication. Because I remember I spent a great portion of one entire day helping a client who did not have Part D and thought he had. And the medications with an S that he needed to have was running over $300. And my time that I spent that day was finding a pharmacy that was going to, something like a Target or a Walmart or somewhere like that where he can get it for cheaper. God blessed me to be successful working with that client, but I was very saddened and actually had an attitude, to be honest with you, sister, because out of the pharmacy at the facility, they was charging him in excess of $300. But he was able to get all those medications from another pharmacy for $50.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. But as I hear and what I hear you saying is he had original Medicare and he did not have a standalone drug plan. So he was responsible for not only 20% of his health costs, but he's also was responsible for his medication. And he probably got penalized for not having a Part D plan, when he was supposed to have it. Because he didn't know. That's what I mean by when when people have the red, white, and blue card, they have the A and B, they think they've made it. They think that, okay, well, I'm covered on everything, but there's more to it. Yes, ma'am. And that's when they really need to speak to someone, about what their options are. A broker, a licensed broker. Yes, ma'am.
Like
because this is what happened. Yes.
They need to speak to LaWanda Muhammad.
Yes, call me.
Your information. I'm getting ready to type it down here in the comment. How is somebody wanted to talk to you? Are you just limited to the state of California?
Say that again. If someone wanted to talk to me,
helping people through this process, are you limited to Los Angeles? Are you limited to California?
Well, I am licensed for healthcare in California, Arizona, Georgia, Texas, Michigan, and Kentucky.
Hold on. I'm literally typing this.
Yes, ma'am.
Of California, Arizona,
yes,
Texas.
Ma'am. Yes.
What else? Where else?
Michigan, Georgia, Florida.
Oh man, hold on a second. The states of California, Arizona, Texas, Michigan, Florida. You said Georgia, right?
Georgia.
Uh-huh.
And Kentucky.
All right. I'm just posting this up here. So now give me your contact information so somebody can email you or something, and if they will need to ask questions.
Yes, ma'am. I can I text it here so that it's can you see
the comments up and do you see the comments on your side of the screen?
I do. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
So then click on that and then you're going to be able to it's going to be a box down there. Yeah, it's going to go to the chat.
Okay.
You can type it in there yourself.
Okay, there.
You got it?
I see YouTube. It say connect to YouTube. That's not it, right? It
Girl,
says
what's your
join the
contact
chat.
information? I'll put it in there.
Okay, now it's long, but it's LaWanda,
Uh,
LAWANDA at Golden App, and the abbreviation for services, SRVS.com. Yes, ma'am.
srvs.com. Okay, again, if you want to reach out to Sister LaWanda to have her answer your questions, her email address to where she can be contacted is LaWanda at goldenappservices.com. That's LAWANDA at golden, GOLDENAPPSRVS.com. I'm
Yes.
getting ready to put that in the chat. You all have a wonderful evening, Sister LaWanda. Again, I thank you so much. And I hope that your line is busy all the time,
Oh, thank
because
you.
I know somebody listening or somebody who will listen knows somebody that needs to have a conversation with you.
Yes, ma'am.
They need to
Yes.
have a conversation with you about burial, what they call it,
Final expense.
final expense insurance policy, and also about Medicare. So, family, I thank you all so much
Thank you,
for
sister.
reaching out for us. Thank you so much for tuning in to Minding My Mind. And that's the end of our podcast for this evening. Thank you all so much for coming. Love you, love you, love you. Peace.
Love you too.
Yes,
Peace.
ma'am.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.